actually thousands of my colleagues. It's not somewhere actually I ever intended to be, the United Nations. It's very strange because I've spent my life starting as a young boy dreaming about building AI, and then having spent the rest of my life actually trying to do that. And it's a really exciting time to be working on that. We're making actually real progress. And every day you open the newspaper and there's some new story about some new success. So it's really exciting. And you shouldn't underestimate, I think people do rather underestimate how much of a change, how much of an impact it's going to have on our lives. It will be like the Industrial Revolution. It will completely transform many aspects of our lives, not just warfare, but the nature of employment, the nature of education, the nature of health, an area of our lives that won't touch. Interestingly, at the beginning of this week, I was at the Cambridge Conference on Catastrophic Risk. So we had scientists, meteorologists, physicists, biologists coming together. We spent obviously a lot of time talking about climate change and giant meteorites. But one of the 3 days of that conference was actually devoted to talking about artificial intelligence. So as a scientific community, we're certainly very aware of the potential for these technologies. But that's not what got me here. What got me here was thinking about things that are much, much nearer. In terms of thinking about having artificial general intelligence machines that are much more intelligent than us, that's maybe 50 or 100 years away. But that's not what really worries me. I'm not worried particularly about smart AI. In fact, the smarter the AI is, the less I'm worried about it in many respects. I'm actually very worried about stupid AI, that we're going to be giving autonomy to machines that are not capable of making the life or death decisions. And I was sufficiently worried about that a year or so back that I got involved with drafting an open letter calling upon a preemptive ban for lethal autonomous weapons. And I could see, as many of my colleagues, thousands of my colleagues who signed that letter, the many, many risks that we face in the very, very near future. And what's important, I think, about that letter is not that it was signed by some people that very well-known people that you will know of, like Stephen Hawking, the physicist, or Elon Musk, people like this, but it was signed by all of my colleagues, all of the people that I respect and work with, many of the leading researchers at companies like Google and Facebook, and many of the researchers working at leading universities around the world, signed that letter. And with almost one voice, the community has spoken in a very clear message, saying that there will be an arms race, and that this will be a very disastrous road to go down. And unfortunately, everything I've seen in the last year has convinced me that that arms race has already begun. You have already seen the US Navy prototype its first autonomous ship in the last year, the Sea Shepherd. You have already seen British Aerospace flying their prototype autonomous drone, the Tyrannis drone. And in every sphere of the battlefield, on the land, the sea, under the sea, Boeing's autonomous submarine, you can see the developments happening as we speak. And so the forecast that we made there, that this arms race, has already happened, is starting to happen. And there are many other risks. These are technologies that will fall into the wrong hands. They will be used by terrorists and rogue nations. They will be used against us. They will be used against civilian populations. Any moral safeguards that we could put in place will be removed. Every computer system that we've ever built has been hacked by someone, or could be hacked by someone, and these are systems that will be hacked by people. So even if we could build them, which we can't today, to behave morally, to follow international humanitarian law, they won't necessarily be used in that way. And to be frank with you, we don't know how to build machines that are ethical and moral today. It's a really fundamental research challenge that's going to take us, I don't know, 20, 30, 40, maybe more years. We'll have to solve this problem because, well, we're going to have autonomous cars. They're going to make our lives so much better, our cities so much safer. They're going to transform the economics of transportation. But those cars are going to have to drive following the right sorts of ethics. And similarly, everywhere else that AI is going to be building. Eventually, the technology will be ready for the big time. I'm pretty sure that we will be able to work out how to build such machines. machines. But not today, and not the machines that many militaries are possibly going to be building in the next 5 or 10 or 15 years. And just as an example, I mean, this is an area that's interesting where the technology companies, in many respects, way ahead of the curve, and even the defense companies. You might have seen the newspaper this morning. An unsurprising headline: Uber has to take their autonomous taxis off the roads of San Francisco because they're driving through red lights. Now, the most fundamental thing you do when you build an autonomous car is to say, stop at red lights. And we're still not getting that right. It's not surprising that robots go into factories. That's obviously the first place you're going to put robots, because that's a very controlled environment. We can control the whole environment. But as soon as we try and put our machines out into the real world, into the complexity of the real world, then we quickly discover that our machines are still very brittle. And they will drive through red lights and do all the things that we don't want them to do. But eventually, of course, we will, I'm pretty sure, that's why I work in AI, we'll work out how to solve some of these difficult problems and get the machines to behave. But it's still going to be very challenging to give you any predictions, any confidence that they will behave precisely as you expect. These will be machines that will learn. That's pretty certain how we're going to build AI. We're going to build machines that learn. And so they're going to learn off things that, just like your children, you don't know exactly how they're going to behave every time. They're going to be our children. They will eventually be much more capable and much more reliable. I still have some concerns about that. But then other concerns come into play. I think it's easy to try and ignore the fact that there are different arguments come into play at different points. So I have some arguments why I would be concerned about autonomous weapons in the very near future, and then I have other arguments that I would present to you when I consider autonomous weapons in 50 or 100 years' time, where the systems, where the technologies will be much more capable. When the technology is much more capable, they will lower the barriers to war. There will be flash crashes. Now that happens already today in the financial markets, and we could perhaps unwind those transactions. It's not going to be the same as when wars have started because of complex interactions between our machines. They will be complex systems. They will behave in unpredictable ways. And then finally, I mean, of course, there's that fundamental, deep moral question, which is, should we ever be giving machines those life or death decisions? So, since that open letter, the scientific community has continued to address these questions and to think about how it can inform the debate and how it can help push things in the right direction. And as part of that, the IEEE, the Institute for Electrical and Electronic Engineers, the largest technical professional organisation in the world with some 500,000 members, has actually started an initiative to define some ethical guidelines for people like myself who build autonomous systems. And on Tuesday, the first report of that task force came out. That report makes some very clear warnings. It warns that autonomous weapons will destabilize international security, it will lead to unintended military escalation and even possibly war, and it will upset the strategic balance, the geopolitical balance that we see today, and encourage offensive rather than defensive action. These will be very destabilizing weapons. In the past, I mean, your military might was largely determined by how big an army you could raise and how well you could persuade people in your army to follow your orders. That's going to be completely overturned. Your military might will now be determined by your ability to buy some rather cheap weapons. And you won't have to persuade anyone to follow your orders. You'll be able to just write a couple lines of code and control swarms of these robots. So this is going to be terribly destabilizing to the geopolitical situation. One person, one despot, will be able to control a civilian population, suppress a civilian population. You know, these are terrible and terrifying thoughts. The report also contains a number of very simple and clear recommendations. So I'm going to read the two recommendations. There are a number of, the report considers autonomous systems as a whole and how they're going to impact our lives, our privacy, many other issues. But there's a whole section devoted to autonomous weapons. I was involved with the committee that was tasked to think about this issue. And we made a few very simple and clear recommendations. And I'm just going to read those recommendations to you. The first is, there must be meaningful human control over individual attacks. Right? I think we put that in as clear terms as we could as our scientific recommendation. And then the second, which is that the design, development, or engineering of autonomous weapons beyond meaningful control to be used offensively or to kill humans is unethical. Again, I think we put it pretty clearly to you. So the scientific community has some pretty clear and simple advice. The world would be a much better place if we don't go down this road. We're at a choosing point of which direction we go. I pray we start that process tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, we will now hear from Jonathan Frerichs. He is currently a humanitarian disarmament consultant for the World Council of Churches and a UN representative for disarmament in Geneva for Frerichs International. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's exciting when people from different walks of life address a common problem, and you can subscribe fully to the perspectives of another concerned group. And to hear this list of ethical concerns from the scientists is, I think, really an important indicator of the challenge that we face here together. I'd like to point briefly to the statement we made the other day, a couple points from that, and then offer one or two reasons why now, and one or two reasons after that about, or one or two ways to go forward with why, how, and if you like, how now, how do we go forward? The statement the other day was basically addressing the first part of the topic of today, what is the way forward? We noted from the earlier meetings of the GGE, of the meeting of experts, that the debate had matured and that GGE was warranted in 2017, a more formal process goal, if you like. But we also added that we need a content goal, and that content goal for us would be new law related directly to the prospect we just heard about. And so you need a negotiating mandate as part of the GGE. It appears from what's on the paper and the screen so far that is not happening. We approached this, we said in our statement, really as sort of Martin's Clause territory. And one way to think about it would be to, today we're talking about, is it possible that machines might do things which we are not allowed to do, inadvertently or advertently? So to go back in weapons history a little bit to a time when the Martin's Clause was looming large, in the years just prior to 1945, you could say it was bypassed. The principles of humanity and the dictates of public conscience for reasons of military utility and perhaps other reasons. And we said you end up with a muddle of inadequate goals because you didn't set them. And the sentence that comes to mind is a few states make nuclear weapons. Here we are 70 years later. We presume they hope not to use them. They are at pains to enforce a double standard to keep others from having what they have. And meanwhile, humanity is left at risk. And nuclear weapons are, in a way, a terrible gift to humanity to realize we can destroy ourselves. But will lethal autonomous weapons, as a group, will lethal autonomous weapons be another warning to humanity that we can destroy each other with amazing impunity and from a great distance with few connections, one by one, group by group? There seems to be a resonance of the crisis in that. We also describe the Martin's Clause as charging governments to be the custodians of the general prohibition on killing, which world religions hold dear, of course, as pretty much everybody, we can be sure, including measures related to the state monopoly on the use of force. The churches in the World Council of Churches and in Pax Christi are not all pacifists by any means, and it's sad in history to see the complicity of religion in war, the co-opting co-option of some of the most basic tenets of world religions in the service of national designs. So this idea of a state monopoly on the use of force, I think, is really a critical issue for us on the table and needing to be addressed by both process and by content goals. So that no one under law, in good conscience or in good faith, can outsource to a machine the judgment, the responsibility, and the accountability for taking human life. I think it's fair to say that the inherent deniability and therefore the impunity of laws will really undermine and defraud the state monopoly on the use of force. It's worth considering whether this type of irresponsible, unknown, ultimately accident-prone weapon doesn't give some of the attributes of non-state actors to states in their use of force, because they're going so far beyond something that we have to pay attention to. So the issue of state responsibility, the law of state responsibility, comes very much into focus. One reason why now, why do we have to act now? It's a timeless, it's an immutable reason for why now. I'm calling it the shalom reason. Shalom, or salam, is a Semitic word that says that peace must be defined as much more than the absence of war. Shalom is a positive state of justice. It's mutual respect for differences. It's a sharing, a deep, broad sharing of health, of well-being, of security. And it's seeing all people as inherently equal. That's shalom. Much more than the absence of violence. I would like to propose it as a basic framework for keeping arms control, disarmament, security mentality, militarism, military spending in some kind of perspective. In the 1970s, the UN had a decade of disarmament, and the decade was crowned by the first special session on disarmament. And I want to read you a little bit of what the World Council of Churches said to the SSOD1 in 1978. And have you listened to it with laws on your mind, not the weapons of that day, and ask yourself, and maybe we can discuss, are these points relevant today, even though the weapon in question is different? So the General Secretary said, disarmament is an integral part of a struggle for a just, participatory, and sustainable society. The threat to peace of the arms race, the concern of the day, is inextricably related to the other prevailing threats to human survival: poverty, hunger, racial, political, economic oppression, despoiling of the environment, wastage of natural resources. We could add a few more that are even more acute today. Thus, disarmament is not a technical, but a political and moral concern. Second main point, the only security worthy of its name lies in enabling people to participate fully in the life of their nation and to establish relations of trust between peoples of different nations. It is only when there is a real dialogue, a sharing of life with life in mutual trust and respect, that there can be true security. Have a laws hovering in your mind now, listening to it, thinking of what it's going to be doing as you hear these kind of comments. Third one, the UN is the most effective forum for enabling the nations to work for that international security which will ensure national security. International security which will ensure national security. For the rule of law through covenants freely entered into and maintained by mutually agreed peaceful methods. And finally, disarmament is not the affair of statesmen, statespeople, and experts only, but of every man and woman of every nation. We are dealing here with the issues of life and death for humankind. They are not technical, but human and therefore political. Is that a reason for now? The core message that what needs to be done about laws is not primarily a technical or a technological issue. Remember what we're mostly hearing in the hall. It's a moral and a political concern based on precepts and values that actually don't change. and it assesses human agency and human risk on both ends of the weapon. Both ends of the weapon. Now I'd like to offer a little bit of how now. 3 tests, conclude with 3 quick tests for whether we're on the right track. The first test is the right hands test. I think it's the test that is in play here, as it is in many such discussions at this point in our international affairs. It's familiar from other categories of weapons. Basically, the right hands can have them, the wrong hands can't have them. And that can mean states, it can mean non-state actors, but it does mean that some people can have, some groups can have them. It's basically a default, I think, for disarmament and arms control discussions. It goes very well with advancings in technology, with the openness to new tools, with the interest in new capabilities, with the prospect of new ways to project force, especially force without regard to distance and perhaps to political jurisdiction. The right hands test. The right hands test is not adequate for us to judge properly about laws, but I think it's the test that's currently most likely to be in use right now. The second test is the one we need. It's a little bit in line with something that I think we just heard about from artificial intelligence, from the shocks that are coming. It's in line with immutable principles that relate to fast-moving technology and great rates of change. It's the golden rule test. Is this not the test that was used to ban blinding lasers? Is it not the test that was used way back in the very first item of arms control that I think we know about, the hollow point bullet controversy at the end of the 19th century? Is it not the one in use in outlawing poisonous gas or toxins, biological weapons? It's basically the golden rule test. But what's the law's version of the golden rule test? What is it that is violating do unto others as you would have them do unto you, which there's a version of that in all world religions. That's, I gave you just now the Christian version. Treat others the way you want to be treated. What's the law's version of that precept? I have one formulation. I'd be interested if someone else has a different one. My life is of such limited value. Who I am, what I have done, can be judged by an algorithm programmed by somebody I don't know, and my life can be ended by a machine. I'm not sure that's quite the way to go with it, but if you get the point and you have ideas, that would be interesting to hear about. This is Martin's Clause territory. This is big stuff that is broad and therefore often avoided, bypassed, spoken and set aside. But it's really, I think, the gold standard for the CCW and for its protocols, and you could assess each protocol by how it passes the golden rule test. And maybe some of them could need an upgrade. Finally, the clean hands test. If we don't get to the golden rule test, we have the clean hands test, and no one can stop anybody from having this. And to just point back again to the long learning curve of world religions trying to engage with international governance questions, what caught my attention in 1983 was a position which emerged from a public hearing in Amsterdam about nuclear weapons. And again, change the weapons and listen to this. We believe that Christians should be willing, churches should emphasize their readiness to live without the protection of arms. And Christians should give witness to their unwillingness to participate in any conflict involving weapons of mass destruction or indiscriminate effect. This is a test that those who aspire to not be part of the problem can use for themselves. And to make it a little bit more relevant to the collective experience we have here as global citizens these days, it goes very well with actions such as divestment, boycotting of banks and arms makers who are involved in weapons that the CCW has or should condemn, or other treaties. So there are movements in this direction with nuclear weapons. There's a website called Don't Bank on the Bomb. Maybe we need a website that says Don't Bank on Laws to allow us to have practice what we preach, exercise clean hands vis-a-vis a weapon that is unacceptable. You can judge these tests with that balance we hear about between military necessity and humanitarian concerns. The first one, I think, goes like this, the right hands, it goes right down on the side of military necessity. And humanitarian concerns are up in the top of the seesaw, can't get their feet on the ground. The second one is balanced, the golden rule test. In this imperfect world where there are uses for force under the rule of law. And the third one, what does the third one do? The clean hands test, I think it takes away the pivot and lets the seesaw or teeter-totter, depending where you come from, fall to the ground. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, last but not least, Jody Williams. Jody Williams, as probably all of you know, received the Nobel Peace Prize in 1997 together with the International Campaign to Ban Landmines, and now chairs the Nobel Women's Initiative. And she will tell us a bit more why we need to move forward. Thank you.
First, can you hear me? Okay. I want to thank everybody here for such powerful statements about why this matters so much for our future. I always like to speak last when I can, because I think I want to try to fill in gaps. I also sometimes think I have a framework of what I might want to say. Today, listening to the speakers on the end, Jonathan and Toby, made me feel despair, to be quite frank. It made me want to cry. Those of you who know me know I do not cry. Those of you who know me know that I would prefer to kick butt and make you do the correct thing rather than cry. But this, where we are at this moment is so profound that it makes me horrified, which is part of the reason that I struggled with colleagues to create this campaign to stop killer robots. What Toby said in particular reaffirmed every gut feeling that I had about why this is absolutely wrong. Jonathan talked about the Martin's Clause territory, and I fully agree. I also think about the because we can territory. I feel like weapons developers want to do this simply because they can. That is not an ethical or moral reason to create killer robots simply because you can. It is also, as Jonathan touched upon, not just the purview of governments. In theory, you are doing this in the name of your citizens. The citizens that I have spoken to around the world on this issue uniformly do not want to live in a world where a programmed weapon can target and kill them. If you look in a mirror, each of you, no matter what you do, whether you're military, whether you're a diplomat, whether you're an activist, I don't know what, a scientist, if you look in the mirror and ask yourself the question, do you want to be targeted and killed by a machine programmed by some person that you do not know? You have no idea their skill or what they have programmed. Do you want to be responsible for allowing that to happen in this world? If you really do not care, And as we know, there is one country blocking the movement forward on a GGE. If you do not care and nothing happens, you should hang your heads in shame, which I have said many times before. I think one nuclear scientist who had the courage to step away from the nuclear project before it happened because he could not morally and ethically contribute to a weapon that has absolutely no power of distinction. And that was a person I could call friend, another Nobel Peace Laureate, Sir Joseph Rotblat, and I had the great honor to meet and speak on panels with this man, the only one who stepped away. I'm very happy that in this circumstance, we have thousands of scientists who work on this stuff who do not want to be labeled like the nuclear scientists who did not have the moral and ethical courage to stand up. Thank you, Toby. Thank you to Toby for being one of the initiators. Thank you for caring enough to try to stop this as governments want to proceed, simply because they can. One of the things that Jonathan said in quoting from earlier statements, the UN is one of the most effective forums for disarmament. Notice I'm almost laughing. The UN is the most effective forum for disarmament and arms control. I'm sorry, I gotta laugh if I don't want to cry. Where have we seen that? We stepped outside of the UN because they could do nothing meaningful on landmines. We stepped out of the UN because nothing meaningful was happening on cluster bombs. The diplomatic process to deal with explosive weapons in populated areas is happening outside of the UN because states refuse to do anything to hamper their ability to kill and destroy. So to call the UN the most effective forum is patently obscene, and it makes me feel like I've fallen through the rabbit hole of Alice in Wonderland. I hope that on this occasion, as we sit at the crossroads, governments can get their act together and take this seriously. I honestly, as I said when I spoke at the end of the day on Monday, I hope, despite my disdain, much of the time, for how the CCW treats weapons, I hope you actually do something meaningful on laws. I hope there is a wrong one. I hate the initials. I hope there is a GGE. I hope there is. I hope that states finally will not allow one nation to dictate the laws of the world. There was one state on the first day that actually pondered nations saying, too bad, you don't want to be part of the GGE, don't go. No state, no matter who it is, should be able to stop discussion about weapons that affect all of us, and mostly civilians today. Look at Aleppo. If that don't make you want to cry, I don't know what will. We seriously hope, and I am not joking, I hope that the CCW does something meaningful. We believe that if you finally get your act together after 3 years of informal chatter, which has been useful, but not anywhere near enough, it makes things go as slow as they always do in the CCW, that the GGE is a positive movement forward. It takes this from informal chatter to real diplomatic discussion, formality, a movement forward with an objective of an instrument at the end. We want to see that. We clap if it happens. If it doesn't, I underscore what my friend Mary Wareham said. We will declare this nothing but a complete disaster. On the first day, I spoke about the very failing credibility and legitimacy and relevance of the CCW. If you do nothing, it will be signed, sealed, and delivered that the CCW does nothing of relevance to deal with civilians, and that is your job. We don't want to have to go outside of the UN again. I would love to see, the whole campaign would love to see credibility come back to this body. Meaningful credibility. Not putting a list of weapons on the agenda for next time because you don't want to deal with them now as Aleppo burns. No matter what you do, and again, we hope you do the right thing, we will continue to work at the national and regional levels. We will work with the 19 states that have already declared they are in support of a ban. We will do what we did in the landmine campaign. As the world dithered about whether or not to ban landmines, we worked with states who unilaterally began banning them. We worked with regions in the world who joined together to declare their region of the world a mine-safe zone. I can easily see regions coming together and declaring themselves a killer robot-free zone. There are many ways to get to the goal, and we are very adept at shifting course when it is necessary. And one other thing that I think people do not understand, that even if you do move forward with these technologies, that does not mean we will disappear or we will stop our work. Clearly, the anti-nuclear people have been working since the day the United States of America dropped a bomb on Hiroshima and then turned around and dropped another on Nagasaki. They haven't gone away. We will not go away. I will end with Jonathan noting that if laws go forward, it could kind of turn states into sort of terrorists. I think to hold the world hostage to your desire to create these weapons is state terrorism, as I believe that 9 nations holding nuclear bombs and refusing to get rid of them just because they have them is state terror. It is holding the billions of people on this planet hostage to a handful of states. You do not have the right to do that, even though you think you do. And our fight will continue. We hope our fight is with you instead of against you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so at this point I'd like to pause for a second and take a deep breath and then echo something that Jody Williams said. Not all the things that you said, but something. I know. What I'd like to echo is that we had 4 very powerful statements, very insightful statements, and I'd like at this point to thank the panelists for these excellent contributions. And now I'm looking forward to hearing from members of the audience, from states representatives. So at this point in time, I'd like to open up the floor for comments and or questions to the panelists.
It's also okay to be overwhelmed by what you've heard and be incapable of asking a question.
In my remarks, I forgot to say that we have 19 countries who now support the call to prohibit fully autonomous weapons, and 5 of those countries came on board this week. We're absolutely thrilled to welcome Argentina, Guatemala, Panama, Peru, and Venezuela. I'd also like to say thank you to Cameroon, and Moldova, and Montenegro, Slovakia, and Slovenia. For us, and we keep a pretty tight, close eye from your statements, for us that was the first time that we'd heard those countries elaborate their views on this issue. First time as well for Panama and Peru. So we keep a list of the 19 countries who have banned these weapons. We also keep a longer, yeah, and we're calling for a ban. We want we're calling for a ban. But we also keep a longer list of the countries who have elaborated their views on this, who have articulated their position on this. And that's a longer list that now stands at 78 countries. It's essential that every country speak up on this. And if you didn't mention it in the general debate, hopefully we followed up with you and asked why. If you're here at the CCW, if you're here with your nameplate, you should be using it to give your view on this. Every country in the room has a say, so please do not hesitate to speak up and express your views.
Yeah, speaking of expressing your views, excellent, over there. I can't see your plate though.